Welcome back to Devil May Cry. Last time we defeated Nightmare for the first time, as well as Nilo Angelo for the last time, and he turns out to be Dante's twin brother, Virgil, who also had a piece of the perfect amulet, which is why he reacted so strangely when Dante's perfect amulet piece kind of fell out of his coat during that first battle. But because we have both halves now, we can get a new weapon. Well, not really a new weapon, more like a new form for an older weapon. Force Edge has become Sparta. And if you want, you can change back to Force Edge if you just go into the menu and equip it. But there's really no reason to. Force Edge is really weak and Sparta is really strong. It also has a bit of a different combos. For example, the first pause combo. Excuse me. The last hit of it is a stab instead of an overhead swing. And the stabbing attacks themselves, like million stabs, stingers, stuff like that, rather than it just being the sword itself that stabs, it transforms into a sort of spear kind of thing to give you a lot more range. So, if you want to go with brute force, Sparta is the weapon of choice. But like Force Edge, it doesn't have access to all the abilities that Alistair has. It doesn't have air hike, so you can't double jump while using it. And it doesn't have a devil trigger. So if you wanted to transform into Sparta himself, you can't really do that. Which is kinda lame. I would have liked if they gave you that devil trigger earlier, but I'm fine with when they do give you the Sparta devil trigger, because we actually do get it just a bit later on. Because we don't have a devil trigger though, that means we're not going to be able to increase our defense, increase our speed, increase our attack. We're just stuck with the base Sparta, damage, defense, speed, no health regeneration or anything like that. We have to rely on orbs and such. It's a fine trade-off, in my opinion. Like, it can make mincemeat out of more minor enemies, so you don't have to kind of deal with them as much, I guess. But the lack of devil trigger makes bosses a bit of a chore. And we have an underwater section here that I didn't mention at all. There was a blue orb fragment in an earlier room, and we have to kill some sin scythes. No, these are sin scissors here. And it's kind of lame fighting these guys because they're not as restricted as the weird animal-like enemies were that I forget the name of. The other ones that we saw underwater on the boat. For some reason I couldn't find the word boat. I guess I was looking for ship. But they'll actually try and come up to you and slash at you, which is pretty lame because we don't have any melee attack underwater. And also the whole them dying and shooting their scythes or scissors up into the air still applies, so get away from them when they actually do die. Or, just keep your distance the entire time. And I fell down by accident. Yeah, I kind of forgot that I didn't have air hike, so I thought I could save myself there, and I almost fell down again just there. But now that I'm actually up here with the power of editing, I can actually grab the Philosopher's Egg. You might have noticed that there was another door in this area that we actually didn't see before our first time going up here. If we go through it, we'll end up back in the courtyard where we use the Pride of the Lion in order to kill a shadow, I guess. That is kind of a negative point, I guess I'll say, that the Devil May Cry series suffers from. There's a lot of going back to places you've been before, which some people might not like. The level design does kind of change slightly. Like, the map is pretty much entirely different. But, just the fact that you're not going through any really new environments is something that not a lot of people like the Devil May Cry series for. Either way, we have Nightmare again. I actually died to this boss during the playthrough for some reason, because I did not actually die to this guy my first time going through. I don't think on either of my first attempts at Nightmare 1 or 2 I died. It's the last Nightmare fight that really grinds my gears. I think it's because I was trying to show off Sparta and use it on this boss, and it was good for taking down Nightmare's health really quickly. It could do it much faster than Alistair on its own could, maybe a little faster than Alistair while Devil Triggered as well. But because I didn't have Devil Trigger, I couldn't regain my health or use it in a pinch when I needed some extra defense or something like that, so I ended up using up one of my yellow orbs on this boss. Just letting y'all know so the stats look the same when I actually beat the game. And that's a new attack right there. He lets out the orb on top of his head and spins this weird piece of him around him that can basically hit everywhere. When it's coming out of him, it'll hit right above him, so maybe don't stand on top of him, because that's where the orb is going to appear, and you might think, oh, if I get on top of him now, I could get a few hits in on the orb. Don't do that. Or maybe do it, but make sure you're Devil Triggered so you don't take as much damage. And then after that, he'll spin it around on the floor, pretty much encompassing the entire area, so don't stand on the floor during that attack. Basically, stay on the floor for the initial bit of it and then jump onto him for the second bit. Really not as difficult as I made myself. Well, that's a weird way of putting it. Not as difficult as I forced it to be. That's what I wanted to say. There's another attack for Alistair that I didn't buy. That's pretty lame, honestly. It's called Round Trip. And basically what it is you hold down the attack button and Dante will throw whatever sword he's wielding outwards at the enemy. Or, just out if there's nothing nearby. While the sword is out and attacking an enemy, Dante can perform pretty much his Ifrit combos, just not with Ifrit. And I don't think he could charge them up either, so they're pretty weak. And while in midair, he can perform the dive kick attack, as I recall. Sparta slightly changes during the round trip attack as well. For the other swords, he just throws them out and they spin and then come back to him like a boomerang. For Sparta, he actually transforms the sword into a scythe, and it has a bit more range than the other swords. I think if the swords do come in contact with an enemy, they kind of linger to do some extra damage to them. But don't quote me on that because I don't really use the move. It makes you stay still for a little while when you initiate it, so I don't really like it. And I'm gonna use Sparta here, much to my dismay, because my first time I actually did use Sparta on the enemies that we're about to face in this weird mirror world, and it went relatively well. But for some reason this time it was really dang hard for me to kill these new enemies. I don't quite remember the names of them either. I just know that they're really weird looking and kind of creepy. And have weird voices too. Anyway, once you do enough damage to them, which I did very quickly with Sparta, that's about half their health gone already, they transform into this new weird version that's actually bipedal and a lot larger. It can send out little weird bombs on the ground too that kind of look like eyeballs, and if you come in contact with them, then you'll obviously take some damage. What I'm doing here, do not do. When you're fighting these guys, use the shotgun. Jump on top of them. Keep spamming the jump button and the shoot button. You'll basically enemy step off of them and constantly shoot the shotgun at point blank range, which is a really good method of taking them down, I find. just using your sword is really not optimal. They do drop a good amount of orbs as well, and when they do die, make sure you're also staying away from them, because they don't really explode, but they kind of leave this weird acid stuff behind that does a bit of lingering damage, not very much, but it's still kind of annoying to deal with. And I am very close to dying, but luckily I think that's the last set of enemies that are required to be faced in this area. That was a weird way of putting that. So I don't really need any more health, even though the game did generously give me a little green orb to refill it a tiny bit. And now that we have the Philosopher's Stone, we can head back into the actual world, not this weird mirror world, and progress. Sadly, I want to go out of my way to collect some extra orbs. And I'm going to be switching to Alistair, not Force Edge. Why did I do that? Alistair, so I can use that double jump to its fullest extent. It's kind of required for the second blue orb piece in this area. I don't think I talked very much about it before, but the menu design kind of changes depending on which weapon you're using. For Alistair, there's electric kind of, not really background, but around the edges of the screen there's electricity. For Ifrit, around the edges there's fire. And when you're at a shop, there's fire and electricity. Excuse me, if you have both weapons. If you have just Alistair, then it's only electricity, and if you have just Force Edge, then it's just this weird kind of wind thing going on. And that blue orb was very hard to get. I definitely needed to, like, crossfade there. It's pretty much impossible unless you have air hike. I showed off trying to stinger off of the edge in order to grab it, but it did not work at all. I would just go way too far, and you can't air hike off of a stinger jump in this game, which is pretty lame because I'm pretty sure you could do it in other games. But whatever. We got the blue orbs. I don't even think there is another blue orb for me to find. Well, at least that I know of and that I recorded. So I'm not going to be increasing my health at all. What we need to do, though, is go across this bridge again back to the room with Nightmare in it, as I said, and do a little platforming. With air hike, it's made a bit easier. Using stinger jumps is a bit easier. And I made it to the end, but I fell into the water. And I technically touched the end. Keep that in mind for what happens after. Anyway, while I'm underwater here, I'll just take on these skulls, and luckily, the skulls drop health once you defeat the last one, so I can get a ton of it back, even though, as I said, there aren't really any enemies to deal with down here. Or around here, rather. But, as you can see, I ended up back where I started. I touched the opposite edge, and, as I've stated before, the edge that you touch is not the one you get sent back to. It's the other side that's the one you get sent back to. I think in the original Devil May Cry, it was actually the one that you touched. But in this game, I guess they wanted to make it easier for people, so they made it the edge that you didn't touch last. So, hooray, I have to go through all this again. But it wasn't that big of a deal, and I got even more health that I don't need. So, finally, let's actually progress. And somehow, the elixir just allows you to go through weird portals. I don't know why it does. I don't even know why it's called an elixir. An elixir is usually one of those drinks in RPGs. I don't know why I said that so slowly. That brings back your health and magic and stuff. In this game, not so much. It's just for going through portals, I guess. And in this weird upside down room, there's actually not really anything to do if you explore around. There's a platform at the beginning that can take you back to the right side up version, but we don't need to deal with that right now. Let's just head down into this portal. And let me guess, another sea. Yep. I mean, I'm not really guessing because I played the game. I recorded it. I pretty much know what ranks I got. And I am surprised at myself that I did not cut out these loading times. Although, that's actually probably a good thing because I don't think I ever showed any loading times in this game. So, there you go. That's how short they are. That's actually a pretty good amount of time to load something up, honestly. It's not too baffling. Honestly, this Let's Play probably wouldn't have been much longer if I didn't cut them out. Maybe just like 10 seconds more on each video, that's pretty much it. Anyway, there's a couple frosts in here, and as you can see, Ifrit makes mincemeat out of these guys. I let that one hit me for no reason whatsoever, but Ifrit is really good against frosts, especially compared to the Nightmare Beta that one time, and also Alistair. There is a Goddess of Time statue here, but I'm not going to be dealing with that. I know what's up next. I'm prepared. Which is odd, because what's up next is actually something that I had a lot of trouble with. And I do mean a lot. Like, it took me more than a day to get through what was going on here. Anyway, Trish is somehow in the underworld, or whatever the heck this weird area is. And a barrier has surrounded us. Those floor panels look pretty familiar, as do those wall switches. Finally, we get to take down Nightmare for the last time. And I say finally sarcastically, because we actually fought him very rapidly, like once in the last part and 2 times in this one part. That was... It's so odd and kind of unfair, because he kind of spikes in the difficulty for each battle, and you don't really get much time to upgrade yourself. There's not really anything new to get, even, between the previous battle and this one. So, yeah. This battle's hard. The first time I played this game, it took me pretty much a day to beat him. And if you do get caught in his little refight a boss trap thing in this fight, I think you actually have to fight Nilo and Jello, his last phase, which is another boss that I had trouble with. So make sure you don't get caught. Same strategy kind of applies though. Wait for one of the orbs to expose itself and attack that orb. One thing that I didn't mention was that Nightmare actually will steal Devil Trigger from you with his orbs. And if he gets enough, he'll actually, I think, initiate his own Devil Trigger. I don't know exactly what that entails because I never let it happen. I'm always using my own Devil Trigger to take down these orbs. So, there's something new that I don't know about. My biggest advice for this boss, though, is to stay calm, I guess, and don't pay too much attention to the switches. Only attack the switches once he's gone back into his blob form. Otherwise, you can get away with just attacking him as much as possible, really. That's what my problem was the first time I faced this boss. I paid too much attention to the switches. I kept trying to go back to them, and whenever I did, he would get a bunch of pot shots off on me. I was able to keep him in the not blob form, but you don't want to do that. And turns out Trish was actually a bad guy, which we already knew kind of, but Dante didn't. And now we have Trish joining in the boss fight. So she'll do some damage from outside, take a couple pot shots, but honestly it's not very difficult. In fact, I don't even think I let her hit me at all during this whole thing. She just kind of stays on the side while I take down Nightmare over here. This is a new attack. Nightmare sticks to the ceiling and sends projectiles at you. It's honestly not that difficult to dodge, and because I'm using a Devil Star to keep my Devil Trigger up, it didn't really affect me. Now for this last bit of Nightmare, for some reason, he actually like falls apart and falls to the ground and regains a bunch of health. I don't know why it does this, but it does. And once it happens, you can just pummel the orb itself. And that's it. Nightmare's finally done. Thank goodness. The room is no longer all scary looking with the runes at the top. And he explodes into light, which is weird. Light lasers that can actually possibly hurt people. Maybe Dante would have been cleaved in half thanks to that. I don't know. And of course, since Dante is such a good guy, he's gonna save Trish. I guess, you know, he knows she's a villain, but he doesn't care. He's too good of a guy. He's not gonna let the fact that they're on opposite sides stop him from saving a life, right? It's because he's noble. It's definitely the reason. I talked about something that I didn't want to reveal before, and this is kind of where it gets revealed, and also shows that I was kind of BSing. It wasn't really noble at all. The reason Dante saved Trish is because Trish looks exactly like Dante's mother. That picture that we saw at the very beginning of the game on Dante's desks and on the floor, after Trish ran into the room and destroyed everything, that was a picture of Dante's mother, Eva.
You may look like my mother, but you're nowhere close to her.
And
You have no soul.
this scene is kind of sappy,
You'll never have her fire.
a little bit, but I'm not gonna let it distract me. Back on Eva, the Devil May Cry sign itself actually has a lady holding a pair of guns that kind of looks like Trish. Even in the intro of the game, we see Trish become the Devil May Cry logo, but it might not have actually been Trish on the logo, because, you know, Dante hadn't met Trish at that point. It probably was Eva, although I can't see Dante thinking of Eva holding a pair of guns, because, like, his mom's supposed to be a sweetheart or something like that. Anyway, that's the end of this part.